Hey there friends, welcome back to another day of 31 Days of Samhain. So we've just started our kitchen witchery series, that part of it anyway, and today we're going to talk about cauldrons. So I have grabbed a regular pot just out of my cabinet, just like a regular pot. And this is going to serve as my cauldron that we're talking about for today. Because since we're talking about kitchen witchery, you can't always just like cook in an actual cast iron cauldron. However, if you're outside, you can. So we've talked a lot about basics of kitchen witchery, and the cauldron's a really important tool for several reasons, not just in the cooking aspect. And if you're not a cook, not to worry, you can still use a cauldron or this cauldron flying under the radar as an energetic tool. So it doesn't have to necessarily be something that you just use in your kitchen or like just cook with, to give you an idea. So you can also kind of cook up things energetically. You can also use this as a symbol and work with this as a symbol in your house. Unfortunately, we've had several customers that have come to the store and perhaps their significant other or their partners or their roommates don't realize that they're into all of this. So using like a large pot like this as your cauldron kind of helps keep the peace in the home, if you know what I'm saying. So let's take a minute to look at the shape of like cauldrons. So like you see a lot of cauldrons that are those kind of fat belly cauldrons with a tripod with the 3 legs. A lot of people say that is for the trinity of the maiden, the mother, and the crone, or the warrior, the lover, and the sage, or any sort of trinity you have in the tradition that you follow. So for practical purposes, we're going to use, again, this pot as our cauldron in this video, because again, we are talking about kitchen witchery. So it looks a lot like a belly on a person. It can be very symbolic of the womb, where things come from, things are created. Because if you think about it, whenever you're creating food, this is the place where the creation happens. And it's also like the place where the proverbial birth happens as well, because you create everything in here, and then when it's finished, it's like you have, you know, this thing you've created, like much like a child, but except this, in this case, it's food. So a lot of times this is seen as a place, the cauldron itself is seen as a place of death, birth, and rebirth, or the reincarnation, you know, coming back in another form. So it has very much has like a triple goddess aspect, like that trinity that we had talked about. You can also use your cauldron, or your pot in this case, for divining or scrying. You can put water in here. Some folks will do water and then put it's similar to like what you can use with tea leaves. You can put like dried herbs in there and see what comes out of that. Some people will do what's called oil scrying, where there's water and you drizzle a little oil in it, and then you agitate the pot, and after it settles, you look for shapes in the top of the water. You can also use this as like a type of scrying bowl if you don't have a scrying bowl. A lot of people, you'll put water in this and then sit outside when the moon is overhead, and the moon will cast its light in there, and you can kind of use that to go into like a light meditation or a hypnotic trance and see what comes to you that way as well. Much like when you do tasseomancy or tea leaves, you can also dump the pot out and then read like the herbs or the leaves that are in the bottom, and kind of think of it as like a giant teacup if you're doing tasseomancy or tea leaf reading. It's very symbolic of the way things change and grow. It's very symbolic of that womb aspect that we talked about. And cooking is very much an energetic. So here's a little tiny little story for you guys. I've known Ken Needham for a really long time. He's the other co-owner of Pathways Books. And I told him one day, I'm like, I don't get it. I can't cook. For some reason, it's just not a thing that I'm very good at. And he's like, Mel, cooking is nothing more than alchemy. You're changing one thing into something else. And it's like, as soon as he said that, I got it. It was like a switch went off in my brain. So again, kitchen witchery can be very transformative and alchemical in nature as well. again, you're transforming one thing into something else. It's also round, like if you think of the symbol, like some of the correspondences that go along with it, it's round. It's like community. Just as when people used to gather around fires and they would all eat from the same pot, it's that aspect of bringing people into community. It also has that circle aspect, just like what we use in witchcraft when we create or cast a circle. We call people to the circle, we release the circle. So it can be a ritual space in and of itself just with this one tool that you have. The cauldron's also a good way to work with a lot of different deities or deities, depending on your verbiage. A lot of times people think of like Caradwin, but there's also goddesses out there like Baba Yaga, who's Slavic, and she rides around in a giant cauldron. So that's a deity that you could like look up or work with. Kernunos, which is pictured on the Gundestrup cauldron, that was found in Denmark in a peat bog, and it's amazing. You can find pictures of it everywhere on the internet. It's an amazing thing to see. But also the idea of the cauldron being centered on the hearth. So in our previous video, we talked about how your stove can actually be like a symbolic hearth for you. And for some people, like if you have like friends or relatives and things come over, in some households, they don't congregate in your living room. They congregate in your kitchen. My mom's house is a lot like that. Luckily, she has like this big open kitchen. But it's a very communal thing, and it's the hearth. And the hearth is seen as the spirit of the home. Much like there are flames, like the flame meant that things lived. You know, there was life there. People cooked there. They kept warm there. Again, they had their community there. So it's also symbolic of that inner flame and that flame of the hearth. Now, another thing that you can research or experience through working with the cauldron or the hearth is like it's the doorway between the worlds. So it's very much, we had talked about, it's very transformative. And there's actually ecstatic postures that you can do that would relate to the cauldron and the cauldron on the hearth. And it's difficult for me. I'm going to try and explain it. But it's if you were to squat down, like keeping your feet on the ground, and then like just kind of fold yourself up to your knees, and to put your arms out kind of like this so it makes a big O. And that is like the symbolic shape or symbolic ecstatic posture, they call it, of the cauldron. And some people will like meditate and then go into this position, or they may start in this position. I would have to do it on a couch. My knees are not that great anymore to do that, but by taking that position, you can meditate. You can visualize yourself going into the center of that hearth, going into that spot where the void is, where things are born and created, and then they die and fall away, and they go right back to that void. So there's a lot of things that you can do using, like any kind of kitchen pot is fine, as your symbolic cauldron for any sort of kitchen witchery work that you want to do. So we'll have some more kitchen witchery things coming up for you guys. I usually try to do things for a few days in a row. Everything, of course, builds on the next thing. But you may want to consider, because we are going to talk about this a little later on, the kitchen witchery is going to lead into the ancestor work. So if you have any dishes or pots or anything like that that belong to people that are no longer here and people that are in spirit, you might want to track those down. We're going to work with those. Also, the same thing goes for like recipe books, and it's really fun. Kitchen witchery is one of the things I enjoy the most when we talk about things like this, and I just feel really connected to ancestors and the grandmothers and everything when we get into it. So just to put some thought, into the back of your head, consider how you might want to use a pot or a cauldron in your kitchen witchery during our 31 Days of Samhain, leading up to that inevitable Samhain on October 31st. So thanks again for joining us, and if you enjoyed these videos, please share them. It really helps us as an independent business. And again, my name is Melina, co-owner of Pathways Books in St. Louis, Missouri. And if you found this video, I'm sure you can find us. Thanks so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.